Welcome to our weekly Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion podcast. My name is Pam Noble, and I am the Managing Partner and Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Engagement Practice Head here at the Christopher Group. I would like to welcome our very special guest, Cheryl Kern. Cheryl comes to us with a long career in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and over 15 years of experience. Currently, she is the Director of Global Diversity and Inclusion at Lockheed Martin. And prior to that, she was with such companies as Johnson Controls, Amway, and International Paper. Thank you, Cheryl, for joining us today.
Hi, Pam. Thanks for having me here. I appreciate it.
We're happy to have you. You know, Cheryl, you and I have had several conversations regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. And one of the things that we've really started speaking on over the last couple of weeks was, the whole concept of ROI as it relates to a diversity, equity, and inclusion. And a lot of people look at that as return on investment. However, you have a very different definition, and I'd love for you to share that.
I do, and certainly, Pam, I definitely espouse to the traditional definition of ROI because it's also critically important, and I think often diversity professionals may not focus as much on ROI as we have the opportunity to, part of building the business case and making sure that it's clearly understood that diversity, equity, and inclusion can bring and should be bringing the same sort of business results that are quantifiable and important to organizations as other initiatives do. However, it's been interesting for me during this period, especially since March, where the world has just completely flipped upside down and we're all living in this new reality. It's really been interesting to me to watch colleagues who are awesome at achieving, this work and making a great difference, actually seize the moment and this time, this movement, because it's actually more of a movement than it is a moment, to actually focus in on what a great opportunity this is for us to really influence the future path that's available for all of us as practitioners doing this work. And so from that standpoint, it's looking at ROI through the lens of what are the reasons and the areas of influence that you're focused on, and then what's that return on the influence that's available to you right now. And that's really the premise how I've been looking at this most recently and working diligently to make sure that I'm doing my part to bring forth that influence that's so important during a time unlike any other in history. And if I look back and I think about what might happen, what has happened in the past, rather, where there have been inflection moments, because there have been others as well, in history where we've had the opportunity to step in and to make a difference in new ways. I think this one is just completely at a different level than any others that we've experienced. I think that influence shows up in a couple of different ways. It is what are the relationships that you may not have had access to or been involved in before that now, because of the situation that we're in with both COVID and recent racial events, wonderful opportunities to engage with new stakeholders and different relationships that may not have existed before that we have the opportunity to take advantage of and to leverage. I think one other piece of that influence is, are there areas of work, are there pockets of focus that have been on your priority list and that you have desired to lean into and to elevate and have just not either been able to because of other strategic priorities, perhaps timing wasn't right, or perhaps the organizational appetite wasn't really there to support it. Now's the time to be able to have those sorts of conversations. I know for some of the colleagues that I'm in touch with, and even for some of the work that I'm doing, we're really having brave conversations around race in ways that we've never had them in the past, and that's really creating the opportunity for us to really, of course with compassion and respect, but to really be more proactive and bolder in terms of addressing some topics around race that before perhaps we did not have an audience or an appetite for that really being considered. And I think the list is much longer than that, but it's those two things. What are those relationship opportunities, and then where's their gap work that was existing that you can bring influence to that you were not, for different reasons, able to bring influence to before.
You raised a really good point, and I think it's something that many organizations are starting to implement, and that is really those courageous conversations. And so how has you or your peers used that data from those conversations to help influence changes within the organization?
Phenomenal question, and we are still gathering data, but I can tell you, really proud to say that I was looking at some data yesterday, and, since over the last almost 90 days now, we have actually engaged. We've actually received over something like 3,000 comments from Courageous Conversations, engaged over 2,500, 2,800 employees, and the list goes on. And so we now are looking at that data in a couple of very specific ways. So when we think about our most affected population, which is our Black community as a primary population, certainly we have efforts that we're looking at around our allies, but when we look at our Black population, it's really important for us to say what's the story that this data is telling us in terms of the Black experience. And as a result of that, what are those key themes that are emerging that we're actually going to focus on to help to develop? And I think this gets to your point around what we're seeing in terms of the data and what do we do to take action on it. From the experience and what we're hearing and from the themes that emerge, then what are the primary data points that identify gaps that we need to focus on in order to develop stronger strategic plans of action for our Black community. And so, we're seeing data that's emerging that's saying more of the same, please. That's my word, not theirs. But you would think that most people right by now would be perhaps a little bit tapped out in terms of having conversations on race. That is not what we're hearing from our Black employees. We're hearing we continue to need more of these conversations. We continue to need more information that communicates to us the state of plans currently and for the future. We're making significant external contributions to organizations that do support our community, and that we know also align to not only our values as a company, but our mission and our strategic goals. Including, as an example, there's data out there. We've always been focused on STEM, but what are we doing specifically to ensure that the experience of incoming Black talent into the company is a positive experience, is a rich experience, and is one. If they're an intern, I'm thinking about one that I'm working on with one of my colleagues right now for the company. If they're coming in as a rising sophomore in college and they're a Black student and they're coming in as an intern, what can we do to make sure that we're looking at all the data that we have available to us to say, what are the areas that we need to focus on to make sure that that's an experience that will allow that student to come in and want to come back and to work for Lockheed Martin in the future. And because they're living in an external environment every single day, and also for the most part virtual like the rest of us, what are they experiencing and what are the perceptions that, those things that are on their mind that are important for us to make sure that beyond the technical knowledge that will afford them through their job experience, that we're making sure that we're also being sensitive and sensing what they may need from a support standpoint during this time of COVID. So we're looking at data points that are across the board, but some of the themes that really matter to our people are, please continue to provide us more and to listen. There's another key theme that bubbles up around transparency. Transparency is becoming critically important. Doesn't mean that it wasn't there before, doesn't mean that we have not provided it, but now more than ever, Black employees want to know, tell me the state of our real workforce, tell me what is going on, tell me what the deal is, tell me what the trends are, because the positive of it is they want to be part of the solution. I've loved this about the movement that we're in, Pam, and that is that people want to be part of the solution. People aren't sitting back and waiting to say, okay, let me see what the company's going to do. Just as there are movements outside and people are actively engaged in them, inside of the company, our Black employees are saying, sign me up. I want to contribute to tangible solutions that can move this forward for the whole company. So we've got a list of about 5 or 6 items that are emerging as themes, and from a data standpoint, we're working with we have a data analytics group that actually looks at employee engagement across the company, and we're partnering and collaborating with them, looking at this through a data science lens to say, what does this mean? Where should we be focused, and what does it correlate back to in terms of overall employee engagement for the organization?
I thank you so much for your time, Cheryl. I look forward to having more conversations with you in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Thanks for the opportunity. Take care. Bye-bye.